Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. We so appreciate it. We hope the information we're going to cover tonight is helpful. Just as people are coming in, if you don't mind, just you should see a poll on your screen. It just gives us a general idea in terms of who's in front of us and who our audience is tonight. So we'll just give people a minute or two just to fill this out. All right, welcome everyone. If you're just joining us, we're just going to give it another minute or so just to give people time to jump on. As you're waiting, if you don't mind just filling out the poll that you see on your screen, it's just helpful for us to get a sense in terms of who our audience is tonight. So we appreciate your taking the time to do that. We'll give it another minute or so, and then we'll get going. All right, thanks everybody for joining. If you're just jumping on, we're going to get going in a minute or so. Just waiting for everyone to come in. And while you're waiting, if you don't mind just filling out the poll, just so we can get a general sense in terms of who our audience is tonight. But we'll probably get going in about another 30 seconds or so. People are still coming in, but it is slowing down. All right, welcome everyone. If you're just joining us, we're going to get going in like 10 more seconds. But if you haven't filled out the poll, if you don't mind taking a minute just to fill that out, it will just give us a decent sense in terms of who's in front of us tonight. So we appreciate it. And we appreciate everyone joining tonight and taking the time. I hope what we're going to talk about is helpful for you. All right, people are still coming in. All right. It is 8:02 according to Verizon time, so we will get going here. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining tonight. I hope the information we're going to share with you is helpful. I'll have the panel introduce themselves in a minute, but just a huge shout out to all of them for taking the time to join us tonight and for sharing their expertise with us. So welcome to The Real Deal on APs and college admissions. Kind of three major goals for the presentation tonight, or for our conversation tonight. At a high level, it's really just to get some greater insight into AP classes and AP exams and getting a little bit more context in terms of what these are and what they're about. Also, we definitely want to just clear up some common misconceptions that always seems to surround APs and the AP exams. And hopefully by doing that, my real goal tonight is number 3 here, is just reduce some of the anxiety that always seems to surround this topic for both students and parents. And again, try to put these tests in context for you a little bit and just try to, just reiterate the fact that they're not the be all end all of the college application process. And, your students' lives do not depend on how they may have done on an AP Lang exam. Okay, so in terms of just some logistical things, on your screen, you should have a question and answer box. Please, if you have any questions as we're having our conversation tonight, please feel free to enter those questions into that Q&A. Just in the interest of time, we're going to hold questions to the end, but I'll try to keep us moving tonight. I'll keep an eye on the time. My goal is to try to wrap up our conversation around 8:50 if we can. And then that should give us a good 10-15 minutes to open it up and dive in and answer any of the questions that you have. So please don't hold back. Please feel free to ask anything as we're going through our conversation tonight. And also, we are going to cover a lot of ground in a relatively short amount of time. Please don't feel like you have to hang on our every word tonight. We'll obviously feel flattered if you do. But again, the real goal tonight is just at a high level, you walk away with just a little bit of context and a better understanding of these tests and how they're used in the college admission process. But we are recording this. We're going to try to get that recording link out to you tomorrow. So just if you want to go back, rewatch, re-listen to any of this, you'll have the opportunity to do so. And if you have any friends or colleagues who you think might be interested in this topic, absolutely feel free to forward that link to the recording on to them. And here's our panel tonight. Again, huge shout out and huge thanks to all of them. for taking the time and for sharing their expertise with us. So I will stop sharing, and then I'm just going to quickly ask each of them just to introduce themselves, just so you know who we're talking to tonight. Nathan, do you want to go first?
Absolutely, no problem. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Dr. Nathan Mack. I work as an Associate Director of Admission at the University of Southern California in beautiful sunny Los Angeles, California. And it's a pleasure to be with you all this evening. Thanks for joining.
Mary, you want to go next?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. My name is Mary de Villiers. I serve as the Director of International Admissions for the University of Notre Dame, and I'm really pleased to be here with all of you tonight.
Mark, we'll kick it to you.
Yes, hello. Welcome, everyone. My name is Mark Macon. I'm the Associate Director of College Counseling at Groton School in Groton, Massachusetts. That's a fancy way of saying that I am a college counselor.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. And Mark, you've also in your history been on the other side of the desk in terms of college admissions. So you might end up wearing two hats tonight as well. So Mark can provide a nice perspective there in terms of kind of what we say as being on both sides of the desk there. And then John.
So, hi everyone, I'm the founder and CEO of Marco Learning. We support AP students, AP teachers, and AP programs around the country. I've been a teacher for the last 23 years, and I'm based in Princeton, New Jersey.
And then John also wears two hats. In addition to knowing the AP exams inside and out through his founding of Marco Learning, John also is a college counselor for one of the local independent schools in Princeton, New Jersey. So we will rely on both of those expertises tonight. And I'm Drew Heilpern. I'll be moderating this conversation tonight. I've been in the test prep and tutoring world since 2010 now, so going on 15 years. And my specialty in the AP land is back in the day, I got a PhD in immunology / microbiology of all things. So one of my favorite things to work on with students is AP bio. And also vicariously, my wife is an AP English teacher in one of our local public high schools. So I vicariously get to go through the AP Lang testing experience through her every single year. So I may or may not draw upon that tonight. But again, thanks to the panel for joining. All right, so just to start us off here, we're going to start pretty high level, and Mark or John or anyone can really chime in here. But just when we talk about like AP classes and AP exams, we know they stand for advanced placement. But what does that really mean? And how does it differ from what we would ordinarily consider like a typical kind of high school class? And again, anyone can jump in here. I'm going to run this pretty informally. John, you want to
Yeah, I'll
start us
just give
off there,
the
set the
overview.
stage?
There's this incredible thing about America's high schools and America's colleges is that the last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college are kind of the same. You're doing, let's say an advanced biology class or a literature class or a calculus class in high school. Then you get to college and you have to take calculus 101, biology 101. And so about 70 years ago, the heads of some private schools and some universities got together and said, let's kind of create this crossover in advanced placement. It was designed as a very narrow and kind of prestigious program. I think it was the second founder of the AP program or second leader who said that the advanced placement program is predicated on the assumption that not all students are created equal. It was meant as an elite group of students who could take exams at the end of their course, their AP courses, and earn college credits. And therefore, they wouldn't have to repeat that calculus course or that biology course. Over the last 30 years, the program's grown a lot. We now have more than 5 million AP exams in 40 subjects all around the world. And so it's a big, complicated program that involves America's high schools, America's colleges. It's one of those few places where high schools and colleges really collaborate together. It's professors at colleges and high school teachers who write the curriculum, who write the exams, and who score them. So the advanced placement program is something like 70 years in the making, and it's a great opportunity for students to graduate high school with college credits in their back pocket. I actually did that as an undergrad at NYU and graduated in 3 years because I had AP credits. So that's the overarching history of the program.
And then Mark, can you speak to, like, we know Groton School in terms of being academically rigorous and everything, but not all of your, highest level of classes actually lead to an AP course, correct?
Yeah, so I work at Groton. It's a small boarding school in Massachusetts. We're about 380 students or so. And what we are called, we are actually not an AP school. We are a hybrid school, or we have what's called a hybrid curriculum, which means that we both offer the APs, and then we also have classes that we teach that are not AP level classes, but they are still high level classes. They are taught at the AP level or above. And those students, even though we don't follow exactly the AP curriculum, those students are still able to take AP class, take the AP exams. So, for instance, we offer English. We call it, junior English, and about 80% of our students will end up taking the AP English Literature and AP English Language exams without being quote unquote in an AP class. But then we have very traditional AP classes like AP Statistics, AP Calculus, where it's exactly, we follow the exact AP curriculum that is set forth by the College Board.
Right, and the idea of the AP coursework, whether it's in an actual formal AP class or not, is to try to mimic kind of the experience that a student would have in an intro college level class. So by design, it is trying to extend the curriculum a little bit, as John mentioned, to kind of overlap with what students would get exposed to in those early intro classes in college. And then Mary and Nathan, I'll kick this to you. So I know there's people on the call and we get this question all the time, like, what if my student attends like a non-AP, what we call a non-AP school? So Mark mentioned their school is hybrid. They do have some AP classes, but many of their highest level classes are not actually AP. But there are certainly schools out there where, for one reason or another, maybe they just didn't want the College Board to have to approve their syllabi for the highest level courses, who have not gone sort of on this AP track. So are they disadvantaged in any way, just not being able to show that they've taken these AP classes on their transcript? Kind of how do you look at those students, and also just try to reassure families again that they're not disadvantaged here? Nathan, you want to start there?
Sure. Got a couple different thoughts swirling in my head. So one of the things, and John alluded to this when he was talking about the last 2 years of high school and the first 2 years of college, one of the things that's sort of unique about American education specifically is the broad landscape of opportunity and types of high schools and types of high school curricula that actually exist. Secondary education in the United States compared to most of the world is actually relatively underregulated. And there's a lot of choice given to individual schools and individual districts to make the decision about what they're going to teach students. And again, that varies from place to place, of course. And so what you then, as a result, have is a university admission process that then is required to understand students coming from lots of different contexts, lots of different backgrounds, with many, many different curricular pathways, and quite frankly, just items and courses on their transcripts. And so it's at USC specifically, where I work, and everyone does this, but to a slightly different degree depending on how they structure the office. But we ask our team members to serve as territory managers, and their job is to become, and again, everyone does this, but to a certain different degree depending on how the office is organized. Our folks are required to become experts in their particular part of the world that they serve as admission officers, and then to understand what curricular opportunities are available to each applicant within each particular school and context. So we talk all day, every day, endlessly about evaluating in context. And I tell my staff, your job is to find and advocate for competitive, compelling students based on the context from which they are applying. And in this particular instance, context is broader than just the courses available to you. There's a lot that goes into context. But in this particular scenario, it really is about blooming where you are planted, thriving in the context in which you are studying. So if you have AP curricular courses available to you, and that's your opportunity to challenge yourself, it would be our expectation that you do that, especially as a highly selective university. But if a school does not offer AP curriculum, or frankly, any differentiated curriculum at all, there are some schools that don't have differentiated curricula. Most have some level of differentiation available to students, but not all. It is about understanding what challenge looks like in that particular school and not disadvantaging a student for not having AP courses, right? We often say that high school students themselves have very little choice in where they end up in high school. Very little choice. There are a lot of very small, sometimes medium and sometimes large choices that families or life made for students that result in where they go to high school. So we don't want to penalize a student for a lifetime of choices that landed them in a particular high school environment, but we want to advocate for students who are challenging themselves given what's available to them. And that is really, really important. And we constantly reiterate that message when we're training our staff around application review, around the recruitment process, and about advocating for individual students.
Nathan, thank you. And Mary, just to add to that, so how do you all know as college admission officers, like how do you all know that, oh, well, this is a quote AP school or this is a non-AP school?
Sure. So in your application, which comes to us from your school in terms of your transcript and an additional part that gives us more background information on your school, typically your guidance counselor is going to give us information that will help us better understand what curriculum is available at your particular school. They may also include even more documents that really unpack like what success looks like in your school. And that includes the amount of courses that are available to you that differ from just the traditional college preparatory curriculum at your school. So if they offer AP, if they offer IB, if they offer honors, if they offer dual enrollment, or they have their own unique tracks within the school, that's all going to be highlighted within that documentation. And oftentimes too, your counselor recommendation letter will kind of outline the pathway that you are on within that particular school.
Very great. All right, thank you. So this is a question we get all the time. Like, so what is an quote appropriate amount of rigor, right? We know that colleges are looking for rigor, right? We know that colleges want to see students stretch themselves. But like, how do you balance a challenge with not being so overwhelming that you have to sacrifice extracurricular activities or sacrifice sleep or your own mental health or other things? So how do you think about kind of striking that balance? So John and Mark, I might look to you on sort of like the high school side in terms of like how do you advise students and how to advise families in terms of just some high level guidelines in terms of what they should be thinking about in terms of what a manageable course load might look like. Obviously it's going to be different from each individual student. And then Nathan and Mary, I might ask you just to add some color to that in terms of kind of what your expectations are, or as you're looking at it from the college admission side.
Thing I'll say from the high school side is I'm advising students on questions like this. It's what I hear from so many admissions officers, and I'll be curious to hear what Nathan and Mary have to say, is so many admissions officers say students and families jump through all these hoops of what they think we're going to want, that we really want you to be do the newspaper and take 7 APs and do all this stuff that you don't actually want to do. You don't belong in that AP class where you don't really want to be in that subject and study at that level, or you can't handle it. So we've always advised students to take what they can handle, to follow their authentic passions and interests. I am curious about what Nathan and Mary are going to say, because there is this problem of, at the end of the day, the student with 2 AP exams and the student with 12, if you're comparing an apple to an apple, the student with 12 is better, or maybe not. So I'll be curious to hear what you all say, but we've tried to encourage students to stop going through this pressure that they put on themselves to do things that colleges will like. Colleges want students to follow their passions and be successful, not to crush themselves with work and jump through these hoops. But I'm curious, Mark, how you advise given the complexity of your school environment.
Yeah, and that's a great question. And I'll just elaborate a little bit on what John said. We have students coming in, because they hear from the seniors and the juniors. So we'll have a freshman come in and be like, I have to take, 8 AP classes. And we always advise them, we always tell them, first of all, we say, have fun, have a lot of extracurricular activities. And we say it's always a balance between the rigor of your curriculum and the performance, within that curriculum. So that it really makes no sense for you to be taking 8 AP classes and not being able to handle it, and not getting enough sleep, and not, being excited about your extracurriculars and kind of slogging through the day. that doesn't help anybody. And so it's always that balance between the rigor and the performance. And that's an individual conversation with students. We have students that have 6 AP classes and they're incredibly successful. We have ones that have 4 that are incredibly successful as well in the process. We also, if you take an intro to biology class at Groton and you do really, really well, you'll get recommended to take the AP biology class. If you don't do really, really well, it won't, and not even really, really well, but if you really struggle in that class, we'll say, we have other levels of biology, in between. And so we don't automatically say, okay, we're going to put you in the biology class and then you're going to struggle again. And again, that doesn't help anybody.
And I will say too, just to add what Mark, just to build on what Mark said, is different schools have different processes in terms of how students are enrolled in these AP classes, if they are offered at their institution, or even some of the highest, more advanced classes. So you definitely just want to check in with your counselor and your teachers to figure out kind of what that process is. Is there a prerequisite class that you need to take? Is there a certain grade that you need to achieve? Do you actually need a formal recommendation from your teacher in order to be enrolled in that AP classes? And as Nathan alluded to earlier, every single school, I feel like, handles this slightly differently. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Just you want to be aware in terms of what your school's processes are. And then Nathan and Mary, do you want to, if you can share your insight into kind of your perspective on this from the college admission side of things? Mary, you want to kick us off?
Sure. So, like you said, it is really going to vary university by university. The other big piece of this for everyone to keep in mind is there are so many different kinds of universities across the United States. And there are many different kinds of students in terms of how they approach their learning experience, like how they thrive and how they learn best. So APs are really important if you are looking at particular schools that have a certain kind of approach to their education and they want you come in prepared to be, successful, not necessarily perfect, but like ready to thrive within that rigorous, academically challenging environment. So if your school is solely offering APs and you have the opportunity to take a breadth of APs that will really prepare you for a university that really thrives on that academic rigor, then we would be looking to see that you would be taking that healthy amount, that balanced amount that's going to prepare you well. For us, we don't admit by subject, we admit to the university itself, but we do keep an eye on how you're doing in terms of your prep for STEM, because everyone at Notre Dame is going to have to take high-level math and high-level science. So we will keep an eye on that. But I mean, I had a question from a student the other day. He is in his freshman year, and he said, oh, well, one of my friends is going to take music theory AP. And he's like, should I take that class? And I said, well, are you in band? Are you a musician? Are you planning to like really specialize on an instrument? And he was like, well, no. And I said, well, music theory is really difficult. So unless you really love music and really love being a musician, maybe that is like, there's another AP course that you could take that would be a better fit for you. So it's not so much about the quantity. It's really about like, how are you channeling this? Like, what is the direction that you know you're going to be going toward and what kind of university are you looking to be in?
A couple of thoughts from my end. And I was going to add this in the first answer, but I'll say it now. Most of us that receive tens and tens of thousands of applications from all 50 states and all over the country, we know a lot about your high schools. We have endless amounts of data about the curricula, the applicants, what a typical applicant looks like, what is the average sort of rigor from a particular high school. We know a lot about schools. I often sense a lot of anxiety around families, understandably, about do they understand? Do they know? Will they appreciate what we have available to us? And I can promise you that we have endless amounts of data that help us make really good admission decisions that are relatively consistent over time, but that also reflect changes and adjustments that are made at the school level, right? Because we don't want to use last year's logic on this year's class, but we want the past to help us sort of dictate and understand the present, right? So that's the first thing. I will argue, I will say something kind of blunt, just only because it's obvious, that if you're a student who has 15 AP exams, is that objectively impressive? Sure, of course. but it's one factor, and it does not outweigh the 75 other elements that we are considering when we are evaluating your application. 12 AP exams does not say anything about personality, impact, leadership, engagement, academic curiosity, intellectual curiosity. It says nothing about any of those things at all. And most of us care about all those things, right? So to try to paint with a broad brush, which is hard to do because every university is different and every high school is different, I'll say two things. One, we want students to do what their school asks of them, right? So if your school has policies around AP courses or higher level courses, and that's what you're doing, then you're doing a great job because you're abiding by school policy, right? You don't need to do more than what your school is asking for. We find that to be very unnecessary. If your school says this is what we want you to do, and this is a typical curriculum, follow your school, right? The second thing I will say is that if you're applying to a highly selective university, we certainly want students to be at least taking the average number of AP courses, potentially slightly above average, right? The final thing I will say is that above average is probably less than you think it is. Okay, we are not actually all that impressed by significantly more than the average, right? That does not really make that much of a difference, if ever, in an application because there are so many other components and levels. So if I said to an applicant, an above average level of AP courses looks competitive to us, which I'm not saying that, but if I did, it is probably a smaller number than you think, than you're going to interpret when you hear me say that. I'm not going to give you a number because every school and every situation is different, but I do truly think that the balance is so important, which is why is probably a lower number than you think, I would say.
Nathan, thank you for that perspective. Yeah, I do feel, I mean, we see it, Mark and John. I mean, we all see it, that along AP for those AP schools, that it does feel like there's a little bit of an arms race. It's just more, 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 more. And if there's one take-home message that I think we all want you to have coming off of this conversation tonight, is really a balanced approach, an authentic approach where students are really pursuing their own interests and passions is really going to help students stand out more than just, I took every AP class I could possibly take under the sun. And the reason why I took it, to Mary's point, is because my friends were taking it. I thought it would look good on my college application. There's no real passion behind that decision. It's just something I, quote, feel like I should do to impress some unknown person. So if there's one take home message, I think that's probably the main one from this is, the admission people, they don't need to see that. They don't necessarily, they don't want to see that. But thank you for just providing that kind of perspective there. All right, so as we dive into just some more sort of maybe misconception type of questions, or just to kind of broaden our look on how we look at sort of the AP landscape. But Mary, you kind of spoke to this a little bit, but like, are there specific AP subjects that are more valued depending on a student's intended major, or is it more about kind of demonstrating that overall academic, rigor? And again, I'll just throw this out to everyone. Feel free for anyone to chime in on this. Nathan, you want to start us off on it?
In my context, given what I know and where I work, we are unique in that we do admit 2 majors specifically. And we do evaluate students specifically for either the major or the family of majors to which they applied. And so I would argue that in our circumstance and in our situation, the selection of a particular AP course over another has more to, it could matter, less so again in sort of the arms race sense of things, but more in a student's ability and a student's preparation for their major and their ability to seamlessly integrate into the academic community and thrive. We're going to challenge our students regardless, but we do really want students to be able to come to the university and have a healthy level of challenge especially in their first year, such that they are able to fully integrate into the all other elements of student life and student engagement. And so because we admit to major, for us, we are going to really only in STEM circumstances, I'll be totally honest, kind of look at that preparation because things like science and math are so linear. Less so in other academic areas because you don't really need to study history in chronological order. You certainly can, but it doesn't really matter. You can kind of move things around. You can study history by region. And so it's not as important as necessarily, say, for STEM prep that we see certain AP courses. We just want students to pursue things they're passionate about, and express that in both the curricular choices, but in the rest of the application as well.
Got it. Mark and John, anything to add there on sort of the advising when families or students come to you and they're thinking about their junior year schedule or their senior year schedule in terms of kind of the big picture kind of conversations you're having with them, or thoughts you're trying to kind of plant in their minds a little bit as
Yeah.
they're thinking about course selection?
Yeah, and I come from it from two different perspectives, because I used to work at a college for 10 years that did not read by major, right? It was just one big applicant pool, and we did not read by major at all. It was a small liberal arts college. And then when I got to the high school side, that I've been on for this is my 15th year on the high school side. We have students, we meet with them sophomore year, sometimes as early as sophomore year, and they say, I really want to be, or I think I want to be an engineer. Or I think I want to do X, or I want to do Y, or I have no idea. And so this is where it's the case by case basis. We have some students that say, I really want to be an engineer. So, and they're looking at schools that will read by major, for instance. And I'm using engineering as one example because it's an easy example, where I say, okay, well, you're going to want to think about doing some math, right? And having a certain math curriculum for the engineering that you want to do. And with that, in certain instances, will maybe also be some chemistry, and sometimes there'll be physics, depending on what kind of engineering that they want to do. And then other times I have students come in and they're like, I really I have no idea what I want to study, and I'm applying to these schools, and they're not reading my major. You're applying to one big applicant pool. And in those cases, sometimes those students are like, I just want to take anything and everything. And we allow them to do that. In other cases, they say, I'm a really good creative writer and I really want to take more Englishes. And so we'll let them do that. And so even at those places where it's an overall arching kind of, where they have a big curriculum, you can still specialize, or you don't have to. That again is, and a lot of this is in college counseling. You look at it's a case by case basis. But yes, if a school is reading by major and you say you're really interested in doing something, then in those cases the advising is going to be a little bit different than if you say I have no idea. That's all I have.
Mark, thank you. John, anything to add to that?
No,
Or
I
Mary,
think
anything to add to that?
well, actually, the one thing I just want to say in synthesizing some of the comments we've made here that I don't want to get buried is the idea that you can't sprint a marathon here, that a lot of students are burning, just they're working so hard. And I know I see you in this audience. Why are you here? You have 4 hours of homework to do. You signed up for everything. And I just want to liberate you from this, right? Like, make choices that are strategic about how you can be well in high school and be successful, so that you can be well and successful in college. Holding your breath for 4 years in high school, you're gonna burn out and it's gonna end up worse for you. And so you're working hard, that your work is valid. Stay the course for the rest of the school year, but as you make choices for next year and the year beyond, find a way to be sustainable and to run the full marathon and not tucker out, and so that you collapse across the finish line of freshman orientation in college exhausted. Don't do that to yourself.
Mary, anything to add?
Yeah, can I just add one thing to that? And
Yeah.
that's a great point
And then
by
we'll go to Mary.
John. I've actually seen that happen, where I've worked with a student. I was their advisor. I work at a residential high school where I'm not just their advisor, but I'm also their dorm parent. They live 50 feet away from me, like right over there. And they're working so hard. And then they've accomplished just what they've really wanted to accomplish. They get their freshman year and they're like, I have to take a year off.
Yep.
Because it's just been 4 years of just so much hard work, and they've kind of lost the perspective. Even when I was like, hey, you can slow down a little bit, like you're doing great. And there was this arms race that we've talked about earlier, like, no, but I feel like I have to do more. It's like, no, you can slow down a little bit. You're doing plenty. You're not behind, so to speak.
Mary, from what you see.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just remember, it's not so much about only getting in, it's also about thriving when you get there. So again, each university is gonna have a different approach to how they collaborate everything together for your education. So you're gonna be wanting to pay attention to that during your college search, but also be paying attention to what is, being advised to you, what is right for you, what is a good balance for you, because ultimately, yes, you're going to get in, and then it's kind of like you haven't peaked the mountain by getting in. You still have another climb ahead of you. So you definitely want to have that stamina and that like preparation for the next part of that climb.
All right, great. Thank you all for that. All right, so as we do a little bit of a deeper dive on this, so this is a question we get a lot. Like, what happens if you're in an AP course, right? And then you take the exam, and maybe the exam doesn't go as well as you were hoping. Keep in mind, right? It's a snapshot on how you did on one 3-hour test on one morning in your life, but you end up not submitting a score. Like, does that detract in any way from sort of the experience you had taking the class? Just kind of what are colleges going to more lean into? Sort of the how you did in the class, the exam, kind of both equally? Can you give us a sense in terms of, it's not really weight per se, but just kind of how you look at that, at that application? Like, they were in AP Bio junior year. It seems like they did great. They got a nice letter of recommendation, but for whatever reason, there's no score attached as part of that application. Kind of what is how do you kind of view that? Nathan, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. So what we get this question all the time as well. And I would argue that the easy answer to that question, and there is kind of an easy answer. Most things around college are nuanced and complicated, which is why we have these webinars and talk through these things. Um, but I would say, generally speaking, truly, what we authentically care about is your pursuit of rigor and preparation and learning significantly more than a test score. Significantly more than a test score. Um, and that is very important to us, that when we talk about challenging yourself and taking rigorous coursework and preparing yourself for college, it is about the courses you're taking and what you are learning throughout your high school career and your experience. And learning happens in the classroom with faculty, um, with teachers, with your fellow students. So that is what we're going to lean on, is the grade in the course, the letter of recommendation that explains and outlines your participation in the course. Certainly, if you have a test score that you're proud of, that you want to send to a university. To be honest with you, I work at a test optional university, and in the post-COVID landscape, AP scores are practically like SAT and ACT scores for us. Where if you choose to submit it, we will consider it and we will evaluate it in the context of your application. And if you choose not to, we're totally test optional. That's perfectly fine. We have plenty of other academic elements to consider because we don't require any testing from anybody of any kind. So I almost see it in that space now as a test optional university post-COVID. Send it if you're proud of it, but it will not replace the grade in the course. It will not replace the letter of recommendation that outlines the type of student you are and the learning environment in which you thrive. So that, yeah, I think I would lean more on the course and the grade.
Mary, anything to add there?
Yeah, again, it goes to that idea of we're looking at you in the context of the high school that you're attending. So if in your high school, like the rigorous classes are going to be like those AP classes, like there isn't a other kind of rigor available to you, like that's going to tell us that you're someone that is not shy about jumping into challenge and taking it on and growing from it. Regardless of what that final outcome might be for you. The main thing is with the AP is like maybe there's some credit in there for you if you achieve really well on that exam. But for our purposes, it's like, what kind of student are you? Like, are you going to jump into the things we have to offer, or are you going to, try to like tiptoe around it? So again, like Nathan and I both work at schools that are like, known for their rigor. So we want to see that you're also kind of excited to jump in and take that on.
Yeah, we kind of frame it to our AP students as like, you've done all this work, right? Think of it as a chance to show off. Like, why not, right? Go for it, do the best you can. You get the score, that's great. Send it, you know? And then Mark and John, when you're talking to students, specifically not about just the courses, but like, hey, it's approaching May, in terms of how they should be preparing or thinking about these AP exams, again, without putting so much pressure on them, but kind of how do you have those conversations with them, or advice that you're giving to them in terms of the actual exam itself and mindset going into it?
Just briefly, one thing, sharing my own story. I mentioned earlier, I used credits to graduate early from college. I think I took maybe about 7 AP classes in high school through that whole experience, but only took about 5 exams, and NYU only accepted 4 of them for credit.
Right.
And so maybe there's just an approach to the point, if we get over the whole, what do I need to do to get in? Well, you're more than just getting into a college or not. But once you're there, maybe you're going to stumble into a college that doesn't accept any AP credits. So it is just really not as high stakes of a moment in your life as other things. And the fact that you can take an SAT or ACT multiple times, the fact that you can hide AP scores, the fact that college admissions officers are saying like, it is not a life or death moment, can help de-escalate this. I think we have a lot of people whipping themselves up into a frenzy, getting online. Parents are in Facebook groups, be careful about them. Students are on TikToks, be careful about those. They can distract you and get you in this hamster wheel of doom. And so really pushing that to the side and embracing, like, just as Mary was saying, you've got these 4 years of college, and I'll also add, like, you got all those years beyond, and so you're focusing on yourself as a successful person, not as, I need a 5 in AP biology or else. That's just a fake rule you're making up.
And then Mark, I know you're coming from a pretty, competitive academic environment, but in terms of, conversations you have with students around the exams themselves, kind of, can you give us some insight in terms of how you're framing those, or?
Yeah, and and we have students that come in and they have this preconceived notion about Groton and how rigorous it is, and they're like, people are taking so many APs, and then they have to take the test. In fact, when students first come into my office and they say, do I have to take this AP exam? I'm like, no, you actually don't. You don't have to take it. I mean, the class is so much more important than the AP exam. And by the way, the schools you're looking at, they're test optional, and some of them are actually, there's a couple of schools now out there that they don't even take the APs, like the exams. There aren't that many of those, but they're like, we don't even want to see the AP exams. We're more interested in what you've done in that class. And we actually have a dean that sends out an email the week before the AP exams in May, and says, try to enjoy this.
Right.
You've worked so hard. Like, this is the culmination of how hard you've worked. I know it's hard to say, try to enjoy taking a test. But it really is. It's more of a celebration here than it is a, oh my God, you have to do this. And we try to change or reframe that conversation on those tests. And once in a while, I'll have students come in and like, I really didn't do well. I'm like, that's completely fine. You did incredibly well in the class, and that is going to be more important than that 3-hour test that you ended up taking.
Mark, thank you. I love that. I might steal that. And that's the way we try to frame it with our students too, right? Just think of it, you put all the work into it. Like, think of it as a chance, again, for you to show off, to celebrate what you learned. Like, hey, you can now try, you now know what they're doing when they ask you that really complicated, BC calculus, free response question. Like, look at you. You can actually, potentially answer that. Like, look how far you've come. And then, John, you've mentioned this a little bit, but can you just expand upon, and everyone, just, for AP scores, some colleges will take actual credit for those AP courses. And then other colleges I know might not take credit, but might use them for placement purposes. So you might be able to get out of an intro to writing. Some colleges, maybe not. But can you just kind of flesh that out a little bit?
Yeah, so
in terms of what we're talking about when we talk about those AP scores in that way.
great. So yeah, and there is a website, the College Board has a credit search portal that's going to be really valuable to help you figure this out, but it's a sliding scale. On the one end, you have places like West Point, I believe, Harvard University, that just don't give credits, don't give nothing for AP. So you did all that work, and you're not going to get very far, and that's unfortunate for you if you're taking these classes. On the other side are places that give credits away like candy, and that would be scores of 3 or above or 4 or above. And NYU, they gave me 2 4-credit classes for 2 different exams. So I got 16 college credits, which is a whole semester for 2 different exams. So you really need to check on a college by college basis, but it will go on a sliding scale of giving you nothing, giving away credits and placement, and then just as you said, Drew, that stuff in the middle where maybe they'll place you out of Calculus 1, or NYU. So they can place you out but not give you credit, or vice versa, give you credit but not place you out. NYU's writing the essay requirement, where they wanted every one of us, even if we had great AP English scores, to go through their writing program, but then they tacked some credits in. And that's no joke, given that colleges are so expensive now. To be able to sort of stockpile those credits, take a semester off and work, study abroad, graduate early. So you really want to pay attention to colleges you're looking at, check out their policies, but be aware these change from year to year, department to department. I will say one other brief thing, that some states, most states in the United States of America, are required by law, they've written it into their state legislatures and their systems, to give you credit at their public universities for certain exam scores. So there's a map the College Board has of this. It's about 35 states have some law that says those public universities in their state. I'm in New Jersey, that would be Rutgers. I can't remember what our policy is, but that would mean that it's guaranteed that 4s and 5s or 3s, 4s, and 5s get you college credit there.
John, thank you. Nathan, and Mary, just out of curiosity, just your institutional policies around AP credits and kind of what you do with those scores, outside of the admission side, but just in terms of options for students.
Yeah, at Notre Dame, we're not going to exempt you from our required classes in terms of like our core curriculum, or like the entry level classes that feed into things like economics, for example. However, it will place you at a higher level. So what that means for Notre Dame students is that it's not like they're going to like graduate super early because they got all these credits. It creates space in their schedule so that they can then build in things like a second major, a minor, going and doing a study abroad experience, and not having to worry about if they offer classes in their major, because they'll have these pockets of space within their journey at Notre Dame because of the credits that they brought in. So it's more about enhancing your educational experience as opposed to shortcutting it or leapfrogging over something.
Got it, Mary. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The institutional policy is that all AP exam scores of a 4 or 5 are awarded USC credits. Whether those credits meet degree requirements, general education requirements, or exempt you from certain course requirements actually depends on the major that you're admitted to and that you're graduating from. So it does get quite complicated depending on what you're studying, but you will still get credits. Just how they're applied to your overall degree varies by major.
Got it. And I will point out too, just because you've got a credit or a university is able to place you out of an intro course, by all means, if you would like to take that intro course at the college level, you absolutely still can. So sometimes we run into this on the sciences where students are like, yeah, I got the 5 on the AP bio, but I really don't want to jump in my first year of college into a more advanced college level course. I'm totally fine doing AP bio, or doing first year bio. Again, there's different labs and things. It's not like they're absolutely repeating the entire course around that. Let's see. Thank you all. This has been super, super helpful. Before we dive into questions, Nathan, just kind of any closing thoughts here? Not to put you on the spot.
Sure. I'm going to answer a question actually in the Q&A in my closing thought, and it's going to be
perfect.
Closing thought. So I want everybody here listening on the call, I want the parents to understand this for their kids, and I want the kids to understand like this for themselves, that we appreciate and we understand the opportunities that are made available to you at your school, and we want you to take full advantage of those opportunities, right? Because they challenge you, they prepare you, they help you pursue your passions and interests, they help you become who you are and who you're going to be. But you don't need to do more than that, right? People ask all the time, what if I self-studying for exams or taking exams beyond my high school curriculum? And we in our admission office talk all the time about no one needs to do more school than what their school is offering. It's not required. It's not necessary. You are at a good school. You are where you are. We value that, we understand that, and we want you to do the best you can given where you are studying. You don't need to go do more, and put that added pressure on yourself, right? Listen to your counselors, listen to your teachers, do what you have with what you're given and the opportunities available to you. Pursue your passions, pursue your interests, and help that come across in the application, because ultimately it's that entire package that provides you access to a university, not an AP exam or an AP or an AP class. So hopefully that's somewhat helpful in thinking about kind of how to frame all of this.
Perfect. Mark, John, Mary, closing thoughts here?
I was just going to reiterate the point that, highly selective universities are using a holistic review process. So the academic component is kind of like that baseline expectation that what you have done will prepare you to flourish at our university. Maybe you're a standout in that regard, but that's not the only thing. That's the baseline expectation. We're also looking at you as a person who has many hours available to you to grow and to flourish in different activities, whatever those may be that are important to you. When we're looking at a really successful application, oftentimes I tell students that it's like there's a thread running through it. I can see it in the courses that you've attempted. The recommendation letters are talking about you in these ways that feed into your activities, and then your essays are kind of tying it all together at the end in terms of this overall impression that you've made. And so that is authentic. That is, we're really getting this essence of what you may add to our classes. So, lead with that authenticity, lead with that integrity to your academic journey and to your extracurricular engagement, because that is really what makes us excited at the end of reading your application, is that it's this cohesive, wonderful thing, and it's unique to you. So that's the best way to stand out as possible in this process.
And then Mark and John, the perspective of just working with families directly and students and kind of guiding them through this whole process. Just some kind of guidelines or final thoughts or general advice.
I have one, which is actually a little bit divergent from where we've been going, because I think we're all in agreement here. We want you all to be well and to take the big picture view. Let me just give you a big picture test prep tip, which is this. I love you all, Gen Z, who are here. And for parents, I love your kids. I think they're doing great work and they're trying really hard. But Gen Z likes to procrastinate a lot.
Yes.
Makes this a lot worse. We talk about, not sprinting a marathon. That also means not waiting to the last second to try to do the whole marathon in 5 seconds. So there's a really healthy, balanced way. February 11th, you don't need to start today, but think really strategically about a plan. Maybe you have a spring break in the middle of March. Use that for some rest and recovery. Maybe visit a college or two, and start laying out a 6-week plan for your AP prep that's really thoughtful and takes care of you. So I remember when I was taking AP US history, I worked out of 1 chapter a day for 30 days straight leading up to the exam. That's a lot of work, but it's also manageable work. It's not this binging. We didn't have social media back then. I couldn't take a picture of myself on Instagram with an iced coffee showing how hard I was working. I didn't procrastinate. And so taking a really adult and balanced view of this will help you work hard, prepare, go get that 4 or 5, succeed, try to be successful in this. But by not cramming it all into 7 days, you won't be stuck in that crunch. And I don't know, Mark, whether you see that down the hall from you either, that sort of it's May 2nd and the exam's 2 days and I'm just
here we go
for 48 hours.
Here's all of US history in 2 nights. Mark, anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I have to add is, there's no perfect way to go through it. You're a human being. You're an individual. You're a person. You are not a machine or a robot. Parents are like, I want my student to have the perfect testing and the perfect package. It's like, well, we're not packaging a tricycle and selling it off. Again, you're a human and everyone's not on the same conveyor belt going to the same exact place. Everyone goes through the journey a little bit differently and through the process. And so, Mary mentioned being authentic. And when I work with kids that are doing the things that they want to do, they are the most authentic. They're not trying to be something else. And colleges don't want you to be someone else, right? They want you to be you. And so I think being authentic and being yourself and being a human, I think is really, really important. There's no perfect way to go through it.
Mark, thank you. Let's see, before we get in the Q&A, just building on John's and Mark's point, or everyone's point, but John, thank you for mentioning. Just as a thank you to everyone joining tonight, and again, just trying to encourage our students to get ahead of this a little bit and start thinking about this. And thank you all for joining us on a webinar on February 11th in terms of getting ahead of thinking about AP and AP exams. But we are offering just a 2-hour online workshop and a chance for students to take a full-length practice test. And you can see the dates here for the different subject areas that we're offering, mid-February to early March. These workshops, they're really intended just to give students a little bit of a jump start, right? As John mentioned and Mark and we all mentioned, just to kind of get over their initial fear of this a little bit, to try to get students to overcome that kind of procrastination barrier, to hopefully get a little bit more insight in terms of what these tests actually look like, some strategies, start thinking about a study plan, as John mentioned, just trying to avoid it hitting, April 30th, and suddenly students are looking at their exam schedule and are like, oh my gosh, I wish I had started this 6 weeks ago. So as a thank you for everyone for trying to get ahead of this and staying on this, we do have just a promo. If you can register, I think it's tomorrow or by tomorrow, we'll send an email with the links to these. If you're interested, they're led by some of our most experienced AP tutors and teachers, and we ran them last year, and the feedback we got, students who joined them, they found them super helpful. So you'll get an email on this tomorrow, but feel free to jump on with this. Also, we have just put up a follow-up poll. So just if you're interested in some follow-up, feel free to fill that out. You can, of course, reach out to us at any time. But just wanted to put both these things on your radar. And then just in the last couple minutes that we have here, I will stop sharing. But
Can I just, one thing I'll just chime in, Drew, and just say
go
about
ahead.
this that I really like, as somebody who's guided people through these tests, the data and that you get from like looking at a practice test result helps you make that calculation. If I'm going to do 30-day, a chapter a day approach for my AP biology exam, which chapters, where are you going? And getting that feedback, getting that breakdown, it's a good like wake up call. So I think it's a really great thing you guys are offering practice exams with that feedback and that kickoff to help lay out a plan.
And I will say too, along those AP exams is, yes, they're taking them a little bit early, right? The actual exam is not until May. It's really just to give students some exposure to the type of questions to help build up their stamina a little bit. 3.5 hours. It's a long test. And also just to expose them to the type of questions that they are going to see. So I don't want students to panic if there's content on there that they haven't seen yet. Well, of course, because their school, their class hasn't covered it yet. It's really the purpose of that is just to give students some exposure to hopefully get over that kind of initial fear of the test, to have them take it and be like, you know what, it actually wasn't that bad. I think, to Mark's point, I think this actually could be kind of fun and will give me a chance to kind of show off a little bit. So that's the purpose of those practice tests. All right, we do have a little bit of time for questions here. All right, I'll ask the one that always comes up, which is, and any one of you can answer this. Is it better to get the quote B or maybe lower grade in the most rigorous or AP class, or is it better to get that, A, higher achieving sort of day in and day out grade in my class, but maybe take a slightly less sort of rigorous class? And I know the answer to this is going to be it depends, but I know we all get this question. Kind of general advice to families as they're kind of thinking about this. Anyone want to start us off?
Yeah, and that's a hard one, right? Because
Right.
it is individualized. But
Yes.
if a student, has done well, in regular chemistry and they got recommended for AP chemistry, we're also a high school that has organic chemistry. And then beyond that, we have environmental chemistry. And then we have another chemistry class after that, where, people, if they've done well along the way, yes, you should continue to do that. And you should continue to get those grades. If you haven't done well in a class that's a little bit harder, then maybe you shouldn't take the next one, right? And so that is tough, because some students say, they meet with me and they say, I want to get, an A in the easier class because I don't think I can do really well in the tougher class. And sometimes that there's a feeling process, there's a feeling out process where a student does take the harder class and they're like, okay, this isn't as hard as I thought, and I can do really, really well. And then other times they can't, right? And they go into the class and then we move them down because it doesn't make sense for them to struggle, to lose sleep. And that doesn't really help anybody. It doesn't show them in the best of light that they can show themselves. Yeah.
Mark, thank you. I think that's a good kind of perspective and way to kind of, think about that. I think we've answered this, but I'll ask it in kind of a more specific way that came in. So like when looking at an application, I'll just read it the way the question came in, and thank you for asking this. But when looking at an application, do you give consideration to student athletes who participate in multiple varsity sports? And I'll even extend this to like, our theater music kids who are at practice every single night, for 3 hours, who take APs, but just again, not that crazy number, arms race type of number, due to schedule as a whole. Like, I think we've kind of answered this, but like, how do you look at that in that sort of holistic approach?
Yeah, so some of the domestic territories that I've read here at Notre Dame, sometimes like a student, if they're really involved in band, for example, oftentimes band is a class that will interfere with someone's
Right.
ability to take that 4th year of language AP, like we get that. It's going to be, you can explain it to us in your application. There are different sections where you can give us additional information. And then, you may have your counselor also explain that to us. That's understandable. And, obviously being a varsity athlete, like there is a lot of pull on your time. So again, it's kind of like, well, what do you want your educational journey to look like at the universities that you may be considering? And is that the kind of environment where this balance is going to be struck for you?
Nathan, anything to add there? Okay, perfect. Let's see, another question came up. And again, I think we've sort of addressed it, but I'll ask it more specifically. It's like, how do colleges look at summer school? For example, my student wants to study business in college. Is there value in taking like an AP history course? Sometimes we'll get this question of like, APs are not offered, I'm going to self-study, should I feel pressure? And again, I feel like we've answered this, but should I feel pressure? Does my student need to Nathan, to your point, do they need to, even though it's not offered as part of the curriculum and there's no way for them to actually take this course, but maybe they could do it over the summer, or maybe they could self-study for it and take an AP exam? Just kind of general advice around sort of more kind of specific examples along that.
Yeah, so in general, we get questions about summers a lot, right? And it's a beautiful chunk of time to do something that isn't going to your school from 8 to 4, right? Like I get that and I understand that. And in the arms race of college admission, it's turned into something quite wild. And we could do a whole webinar and a half about how to take advantage of your summer and what we think about some of the ways that people take advantage of their summers, right? So regardless, what I will say is summer is a fantastic opportunity for students to take the time that they then have to pursue their passions and their interests, to think about who they are, what they want to be, what they want to study, and potentially delve into that a little bit more deeply because you have some time to do that, right? Or take a breath, take an opportunity to relax, reset, have a balance, have a job, do something that just kind of resets you so you can go into the next year and be amazing. And all of those are perfectly fine and legitimate options for students to pursue over the summertime. We would like to see that students are doing something and they're taking advantage of that time to further themselves. But what really grinds my gears as an admission officer is the arms race around there are certain things I'm supposed to be doing in the summer and certain things that look shiny and impressive to colleges. Oh my God. And I'm really heated about it because I feel very strongly about it. Go back to what I said. It's an opportunity to reset, to take a moment to get ready for the next year, to think about, as John was mentioning, take a breath, take a moment to think about who am I, set out a game plan, start working on that. And it is students that do that end up becoming more competitive applicants because they know themselves, they've pursued their interests, they've taken the time to reflect and think and set out a plan. And it just comes across more maturely and more confidently in the application than sort of grabbing at shiny, fun, expensive things in the summertime. that have value. I'm not saying that those things don't have value, but they don't have value just because of what they are. They have value because they can help students understand and develop their sense of self and their passions and their purpose and their interests. So if that is studying for a course or an exam over the summer because you're genuinely passionate about it and you want to, and it's got a clear path and a reason, go for it. My gosh, right? I was a nerd, a language nerd in high school, and I would just teach myself languages in the summer because I thought that was fun, right? And great, you want to learn Spanish? Take a Spanish class, like what a cool way to spend the summer, but not because you think it impresses, because you really want to learn Spanish, and that's great. It's part of your story. So that's my answer to that question is take a business class if you're interested in business and it helps you, but not just because you think we want to see you take a business class, because we don't need that.
All right, Nathan, thank you. And then let's see, we're at time here, but Nathan, Mary, Mark, John, just so appreciative and so thankful for the perspective and expertise that you all brought tonight, and so appreciate your taking the time. And for everyone who joined us this evening, thank you so much for joining us. We hope this was helpful for you. And again, we should get the recording link out to you tomorrow. So just if you want to rewatch or revisit any of this, you'll have the opportunity to do so. But again, just thank you to the panel. We so appreciate it. And thanks everybody for joining. We hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. All right. Thanks everybody.